As you see, Red Square is ready in the moments just before the new millennium. They're celebrating the end of a century, the beginning of a new era, both political and social as well. We'll look at that this hour.
We also will look at that other picture in your screen. That's Baghdad, you see, where things are very quiet. There's not much celebration. In fact, officially, it is a day of national mourning as the country is told to reflect upon the effect and the impact of international sanctions. That in Baghdad.
It is a dramatic time in Moscow. You see Red Square celebrating this moment. The fireworks in the less than 20 seconds now to midnight in Moscow. It has been a day of dramatic events. In terms of the Moscow government, we're not even sure how much of Russia knows what has happened to its leadership in the course of this day. Let's watch the final seconds now to midnight.
Happy New Year, people, and for all the folks back home.
Celebration, more than 1 million people expected to turn out. As you see the fireworks, the pyrotechnics going off throughout the area around Red Square there in Moscow, a great celebration. This is the area that is the traditional celebration point for events in Moscow. But this is also a dramatic day in terms of events for that city and for the country.
It's been an extraordinarily dramatic day, a change of government. In fact, Boris Yeltsin decided to close out the 20th century by closing out his presidency and passing the reins to a younger and more vital leader, at least in an interim basis, on an acting basis, apparently counting on the fact for some political momentum to carry him, Mr. Putin, into the 21st century, elections within 90 days.
Vladimir Putin, the president, Mr. Yeltsin's hand-selected prime minister and now successor. There has been great debate about Mr. Putin's future. The elections were originally expected in June, but they will be moved up now to 3 months. And since Mr. Yeltsin did select Mr. Putin himself, it does put him in the catbird seat going into that time.
And for those who watch these events and for those who watch Russia and Moscow and such things, this becomes a truly, truly transitional moment in this country. It is far more than just these fireworks we're seeing, Joey. It is really about the direction of a nation.
CNN's Eileen O'Connor is standing by in Moscow now. More on the events underway as we see at this moment. Eileen?
Well, there's a lot of fireworks, which people have brought mainly by themselves to Red Square. Father Frost is already in Red Square with Sniggeruchka, and who is the snow maiden. And they are basically, it's Santa Claus who's in Red Square, because this traditionally, New Year's is always the kind of main celebration for Russians. This is when presents are exchanged. And as you could hear, it is a cacophony of noise. There was a parade came into Red Square just moments before midnight with a band. These are, as I said, people's personal fireworks. This is not a display that's being put on by the government. The government originally planned to have 7,000 invited guests to Red Square, and then decided, when people said they were still going to be coming anyway, that they would just open up Red Square to the public. And so this is a very dramatic celebration. Most of the people in Red Square right now, as I've seen, are mostly young people. And many of them have brought the Russian flag to Red Square. And that really is very symbolic. Russia, the Kremlin, Red Square, has been the symbol of Russia's power and majesty really since the beginning of this millennium. The first structures in the Kremlin were built in the 12th century. And so the fact that they also came, young people, with the flag shows that for them too, on the edge of this new millennium, this is a patriotic moment, and it's been a very important day, as you said, politically. And it was very encouraging to the young people here that in his address to the nation for New Year's, Vladimir Putin, this acting president, the former prime minister, has said that he will continue democratic forms, he will continue free market reforms. He did say, though, that he would brook no dissent in terms of anyone trying to destabilize Russia during this transition period before Democratic presidential elections are held in March. But this is all going according to the Constitution. And as you can see, there are a lot now, some more official, I think, fireworks beginning to start. Boris Yeltsin chose this day. This is also a very symbolic day for him. You know, it was 8 years ago in 1991, on, again, a New Year's Eve, that the Russian flag, the Soviet flag, was changed to the Russian flag over the Kremlin. And that was at Boris Yeltsin's insistence. It was he who negotiated with Mikhail Gorbachev to end the Soviet Union and to have the Russian Federation. So for him, sources have told me that he decided that this was the moment to hand over the reins of power to Vladimir Putin, that he did see this very much as a symbolic day on the edge of the millennium. He asked for forgiveness, you know, in his announcement for some of the errors he's made as president, which was pretty amazing. But he also said that he did feel that there was the weight of history in order to turn over the reins of powers today on the eve of this new millennium. Joey?
Eileen, before we talk more about the political situation underway in Russia today, let's talk a little bit more about the celebration and what else is happening in Moscow. There is really a sense in Moscow of trying to revitalize some of the great landmark monuments that we see, that we associate so much with that city.
Absolutely, and what you're seeing in the distance right now is Christ the Savior Church. Now that church was rebuilt on the site of a church that has always traditionally stood and was torn down over the years, and it was after the end of communism that the church here was reestablished, or reinvigorated, really. It hadn't totally ended during communism, and as you can see, there are some of the domes of some of the churches inside the Kremlin. And it was only a few years ago that those churches, too, began to have some religious ceremonies inside of the Kremlin walls. So this is these celebrations. There was a celebration earlier today, in fact, the official blessing of that rebuilt church, Christ the Savior. And across from Red Square, near what was Lubyanka prison, the KGB headquarters, where so many people under communism, under Stalin's reign, were killed and tortured. There, right now, there's a rock concert being played. And at the Bolshoi Theater, also a few blocks away from Red Square, there's a huge ball, a very special ball that's being held. Anybody who is anybody in Moscow is in the Bolshoi Theater at that ball. This is very much where official Moscow is celebrating. But right now, these are just the average Russian citizen inside Red Square. And the people we've talked to today, you know, have been very, very happy about this transition. Uniformly, no one has been upset at all about this transition, and I think they feel pretty pleased that that there will be democratic elections held in March to reconfirm, at least for the Russian people, their choice as president. And obviously, Mr. Putin will face some opposition here.
And Eileen, if I may jump in for just a moment, Eileen, it is a big and complicated country, Russia. It's difficult, and one should not overgeneralize, but as you talk to those people, as you study the place you're so familiar with, what would you say are its national aspirations for these early years of the new century?
Well, this is very interesting, Frank, because it is the national aspirations that Vladimir Putin plays to. You know, he is very appealing to Russians because he talks very tough. He talks about the fact that he will continue to stand up to the West. He said earlier today that he would continue his foreign stance. And he's had some difficult, Russia's had some difficult relations this past year with the West, with disagreements over NATO bombing in Kosovo, disagreements over the Russian operation, which he has very much directed. in Chechnya, but he insists that a strong Russia is not something for the United States to fear or for the West to fear, that it is a stable Russia he is after. But he does want, as he says, to reinstill national pride, that many of the reforms have gone awry, that Russia has been hit with crime and corruption. And people here say that they are tired of the reforms going adrift and so much crime and corruption, and they are looking for a strong leader. And you know, Frank, this was such a powerful country under communism, mainly because of nuclear weapons. But Russia has seen its decline from a superpower status, and Russians do feel a loss of national pride, and they are looking to Vladimir Putin very much to reinstill that national pride. But as he himself has acknowledged, no one here on the streets, and as you could see in recent parliamentary elections, want to return to the old system. But they do want a Russia, a strong Russia, that they feel they can be proud of.
Eileen, they're celebrating the new year, but is there some concern about it? How is the Y2K situation being handled and being embraced there?
Well, in fact, Frank, you know, as you know, there are many time zones in Russia, and in Kamchatka, which is the Far East, the Russian Far East, several hours ago, that the first nuclear power plant in Russia made the transition to the year 2000, and there were no glitches. Now, the Russians have spent some $10 million, some of that help from the West, about $3 million from the United States Department of Energy. They've worked with experts from the United States to try to ensure that particularly their nuclear power stations, their energy grids, their telecommunications would all switch over to the year 2000 easily. And as you know, they did also establish a strategic command. There's one established outside of Moscow here, and there's also one being monitored in Colorado Springs. And so far, the Pacific Fleet, you know, has already itself converted to the year 2000, and this is a fleet that has nuclear weapons, and they too have, there has been no indication of any problems thus far. And we've been monitoring the situation around town. We're in various control centers, but it is a difficult situation. Right now, many people had feared that Russia would have problems, but so far they have not materialized. And one thing I would tell you, Frank, that many people we talk to, you know, it's kind of funny, Russians are conspiracy theorists, and many of them had said that they didn't really believe there was a Y2K problem, that they felt that it was a Western conspiracy to make Bill Gates rich. The other thing, too, is that Boris Yeltsin, you know, or that people here are really used to electrical outages and loss of water and loss of heat, and so many of them said, you know, hey, if we lose our utilities, we'll do what we always do. We'll light a candle, we'll burn some wood,
and we'll wait and see. Eileen, we'll ask you to stand by for a moment there. You did mention the work that the Russians are doing with the United States and international involvement to make sure that the worst of the possible things that could go awry, the possibility of a mistaken attack or a mistaken firing of weapons at the year 2000 turnover might occur. Standing by for us in Colorado Springs, Colorado, is CNN's Martin Savage. He's been working with the Peterson Air Force Base, where the operation is underway, the joint operation between the United States and the Russian military officials. Marty, we know it's midnight there in Moscow, and they're probably watching very closely what's happening there in Colorado Springs.
Oh, that is guaranteed, Joy. This is the critical moment that both the U.S. and Russian militaries have been planning for quite some time. The rollover, midnight Moscow time. The reason being that is the watch by which all of the Russian military, specifically its nuclear forces, are set to go by, including their computers. It is the primary reason that the Y2K Strategic Stability Center here in Colorado Springs was started. It's why at this very moment you have commanders from the United States missile teams, you have commanders from Russian missile teams sitting side by side monitoring their mutual airspace, making sure there is no accidental communication, no accidental breakdown in that communication. Let me explain what the reason is and the concern on the part of the United States, why it has existed this way. The U.S. has always felt that perhaps Russian defense computers have not been made fully Y2K compliant. Part of the reason is finances. Russia is not a wealthy nation. It is reportedly, in published accounts, spent only about $4 million throughout its entire military preparing its computers and the military for Y2K rollover. That's in stark contrast to the U.S. that has spent about $4 billion preparing for Y2K in the military. The U.S. outspending Russia 1,000 to 1. The concern is that if there were to be any sort of Y2K failure on the part of Russian computers, by Russian policy, that has always been an indication to them that Russia was under attack on the part of the United States. What the U.S. did, what they did jointly, was create this center so that if Russia did go blind with its missile computers, it could call here to Colorado, talk to a Russian officer located here, receiving information from the United States to confirm at that critical moment that no such U.S. attack was underway. All that money, all that effort spent, it boils down to one critical phone call made at the right moment. Now, one thing that should be pointed out, it is not essential under the agreement between the U.S. and Russia that if there were a failure of the Russian defense computers that Russia has to notify the U.S. The U.S. is simply standing by with Russians here to respond and answer and confirm no attack is underway. We won't find out how it's transgressed until about 40 minutes from now. Joey?
Actually, it's Frank. I'm going to take it back here, Marty, but I do want to ask you this question. How long is this joint operation going to continue? At what point?
Many people are watching see what's going to happen with the Y2K bug. We're waiting for this thing to rear its ugly head someplace around the globe. Have you gotten a sense that people there are really concerned or worried about it?
I think there is some concern. I think there is concern that when people turn the lights out to watch the fireworks, that when they reach over and flip the switch the second time, that they wouldn't come back on. But the lights are still out for the fireworks. I can tell you that we have passed midnight. The lights on the buildings, the street lights, everything else seems to be working. So at least on the surface, as far as there being electricity, those who were wondering wonder no more. The lights are still on in Auckland. Power is still working. Now, they were concerned that if there were incidents where there were power outages that might be caused simply by someone hitting into an electric pole with their car, that the government was trying to assure people that if there are remote areas that do have power outages, not to be concerned and not to tie up the telephone exchanges by calling. They realize that at this time, people want to call their friends, say they're okay, to say that they welcomed in the new year, and they say that the telephone exchanges here are absolutely jammed at this moment right now as people are making their phone calls to their friends. But as it appears right now, on the surface at least, the Y2K concerns that did exist are not causing a problem, that everything still seems to be working, at least on the surface. There may be some glitches, they say, but as far as the eyes of the world being on New Zealand to make sure that everything went okay, it seems that as the minutes tick by here, that things are okay, that everyone is sitting back now and enjoying the show in the sky.
Well, why don't we all do that? Let's sit back and enjoy the show.
Been watching a major pyrotechnic display in New Zealand. Tom Antier is with us there now. Tom, earlier we saw some of the very traditional Maori celebrations on the Chatham Islands off New Zealand, but I understand there's a large concentration of indigenous Maoris in Auckland as well.
Absolutely, and I think what we will see from the Maori is the sunrise. That will be celebrated in a traditional way. I think that what we're seeing now is the modern day celebration. There is entertainment that's going on, something called This Is It. It started at noon here in Auckland, featuring acting, dance puppets. The symphony orchestra is playing that you hear in the background as the background for the fireworks display. So we're seeing the traditional modern-day passing of 99 to the year 2000 in a way that most people who live in a metropolitan city like Auckland could relate to. But in the sunrise, we will see the more traditional welcoming of this new century by the indigenous people who first made it to New Zealand.
Kind of an interesting mix of old and new technologies we're seeing there as well. Pyrotechnics have been around for centuries. They've been around for millennia, if you will. And we're also seeing laser shows interspersed in between all of this. How is the crowd reacting, Tom?
They're very quiet right now. I'm standing on top of TV New Zealand, and there are probably about 100 people standing out on the balcony where I'm at, and you see people just absolutely silent as they stare into the sky, not really moving, watching this 12-minute exposition that's going on of these pyrotechnics. They're simply awestruck as they're watching the sky light up, seeing basically 3 displays at once. There are barges that are anchored in the harbor which are launching the large bursts. There is a sky tower that you see right now where fireworks are being dropped from the top of it. And the third is a bridge across Auckland Harbor where fireworks are also being dropped and displays are being exhibited. So it is definitely one of the largest I have seen. I was in New York for 200 years of America, and I thought I would never see anything that would top that. But the illumination in the sky here in Auckland in the year 2000 is a pretty good match.
Hey, Tom, quickly if we can, I understand that Auckland is also known as the city of sails because of the popularity of yachting and sailing. Are there any ships out there in addition to the barges out there in the harbor right now?
There are ships in the harbor, and as you know, the America's Cup is going to be staged here very soon. There was talk that the vessels that would participate in the America's Cup would be in the harbor, but apparently that was scrapped because it was too dangerous to have these boats out in the dark. But the harbor filled up in the last 24 hours. People came in to get a front row seat for the fireworks. There are a lot of ships in the harbor. As we approached midnight here in Auckland, you could hear them sounding their warning horns. Now you hear horns in the background as people have basically gone back into their cars and started honking their horns and doing their own form of celebration as they watch the fireworks. But this is a city that in the bay and on the streets and just about everywhere you look in this city, people are watching this magic in the sky as it takes place.
All right, CNN's Tom Mantier in Auckland, New Zealand. Thanks very much. You are watching an incredible fireworks display to usher in the new millennium in New Zealand's largest city and its largest port, Auckland, New Zealand. CNN's Millennium coverage continues right after this.
100 years pass.
In time, the Russian President Boris Yeltsin surprised everybody this morning by resigning as president. He has chosen as his successor Vladimir Putin, going to be the acting president now. In fact, a Russian news agency reports that Mr. Yeltsin has already handed over the so-called nuclear briefcase to Mr. Putin. Mr. Yeltsin, who's 68, as you know, has been in poor health for this year, and earlier today I think he said something, it was Russia should enter the next century with new faces, though he is going to travel. We said earlier that Mr. Putin would go in his place to Bethlehem in a couple of weeks' time, but in fact Mr. Yeltsin himself is going to go through there. And the good news of this morning, the particularly good news for people who've watched the hostage situation for several days, India has now agreed that
it's an exquisite half-carat diamond solitaire and 18-karat gold for a special price of only $19.99. Think of it. Just as the millennium is turning, you'll have the power to make time stand still. Exclusively at Zales stores or shop online at Zales.com.
We're coming up on 13 minutes after the hour now. Before we continue with our live coverage of the millennium being rung in around the world, we want to update you now on our other breaking story this morning. Word that we're getting from Moscow that Russia's President Boris Yeltsin has announced that he will step down early from office. We also have learned this morning that President Clinton has been briefed on the matter, and his spokesman Joe Lockhart has told us that the president was briefed at 5 a.m. Eastern or thereabouts on this matter, and that the White House is attributing this move by Mr. Yeltsin to the strong showing by the party that represents Vladimir Putin in the recent parliamentary elections in Russia, and that Mr. Yeltsin's desire is to have Mr. Putin installed as the next president, and therefore the timing was right for that at the moment. Now, with just 6 months left in office for Mr. Yeltsin, he did make this announcement to begin this new century. The word is that he has resigned and has now set in motion the process of succession. He's also sparked the inevitable questions about the timing and the motives of all this. CNN's Eileen O'Connor's had the details for us right now. She's standing by in Moscow live. Eileen?
Well, Leon, in fact, this process, this changeover has already taken place. Vladimir Putin, we are told by his spokesman, has the reins of power over the strategic nuclear forces in Russia. So therefore, he has what's considered the briefcase that has the codes. He is, in effect, the president now because he commands the armed forces and all the strategic forces in Russia. At 3 p.m. here local time, which is very shortly, there will be a Security Council meeting with Vladimir Putin. And so Russian President Boris Yeltsin has already stepped down. Now, Kremlin officials are telling the independent news agency Interfax that there will be elections. March 26th is the date they're talking about. This does go according to the Constitution, which puts out that if the president were to resign, his prime minister would take over.
The King brothers, separated at birth. George King went to a family that subscribed to fishing magazines. James's family subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. 28 years later, George lives with his parents, while his brother James started a B2B web company and went public with a record first-day pop. Food for thought, especially since you can get 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal for just 57 cents a day. That's 25% off the regular rate. Call 800-258-4600. That's 800-258-4600 for the Wall Street Journal.
It is 18 hours before the new year in New York City, and we are joined now by CNN's Carolyn, who is in Times Square, where celebrations have been happening every hour on the hour. Carolyn?
Cue it. Give me a cue and I'll cue it, okay?
Hi, good morning, Colleen. We are here in what is known as the crossroads of the world, Times Square, New York City, where the first celebration took place 96 years ago in 1904 when the New York Times opened its headquarters at the base of Times Square, now the building known as One Times Square, where the famous ball drops at midnight. Now this year it's going to be a technological display, a 24-hour programming, believe it or not. On each hour, the hour will be marked by a performance of some 500 different dancers and 160 different puppets interacting with a audience of about 1.5 million people expected to gather here in Times Square, each hour celebrating the region of the world where at the time it will be striking midnight. Let's take a look at some of these preparations, which have been going on for weeks, the actual construction of the stage here in Times Square, but the planning of this event has been going on for literally the last 6 years. They have been laying cables and building the stage known as the Temple of Time. The theme this year is also named after the nickname for Times Square, the Crossroads of the World, which is only natural to celebrate the world's cultures. Here in a city so diverse, 80 different languages are spoken. Now, Times Square is also known for its pedestrian traffic. It is one of the world's busiest thoroughfares. Some 9,000 people walk per hour through this area. Security is extremely tight. I can look around me and see police officers every few feet. Now, Times Square is one of the entertainment capitals of the world. It developed as such over time, beginning at the turn of the century. After the New York Times moved into this area, Times Square developed into a major theater district. You might have heard of Tin Pan Alley, for example. Hammerstein, Rogers, Gershwin, Irving Berlin, some of the greatest names in composition were based out of this area in Times Square. And the theater district developed here shortly after World War II. You might remember also that Times Square declined over time, primarily after the crash of the stock market in 1929. But it built up after 1993 when Disney made a major commitment to this area to rebuild and renovate the new Amsterdam Theater. Shortly after, major publishing firms, music television is now based here, some 30 different Broadway theaters, attracting millions of people, 150 different restaurants. It is an area where not only people are to be entertained, but today and tonight, in just 18 hours, they will see a spectacular display of some fireworks, a new crystal ball to make its debut, and also some 4 tons of confetti being fired out from 13 different cannons around Times Square. It's sure to be pretty spectacular. Back to you in Atlanta at the CNN.
Oh, all right, CNN's Carolyn, thanks very much for that update from Times Square. Leon.
All right, let's go halfway around the world now to CNN's Michael Holmes. He's standing by in Sydney, Australia. Good day, mate. Nice to talk to you now that you're back home there in Sydney. How are things shaping up there?
G'day, Leon. Very nice to be back too, although it's a little bit cold and windy here. The rain is holding off, not as wet as poor old Tom in Auckland. You can see there the Harbour Bridge, as you pointed out earlier, known affectionately here by locals as the coat hanger. And some of you may not know that one of our most famous film stars, Paul Hogan, used to paint the Harbour Bridge. He was what they call a rigger on the Harbour Bridge. That will be a focal point of the $3 to $3.5 million worth of fireworks that will go up here in about an hour and a half from now in Sydney. The other focal point, of course, will be the Opera House, where for the first time ever, and the government says the last time ever, fireworks will be fired from the actual Opera House itself. It's been an amazing day or two here. People have been camping out literally for the last 2 nights to get the best positions on this spectacular harbour, and you'd find it hard to find a more spectacular scene for a Millennium celebration. The harbour is huge. It's 250 kilometres of foreshore, and around that foreshore 1.5 million people tonight. That's a quarter of Sydney's population, quite a significant amount of people. And you may be able to see some lights twinkling behind me, I don't know. That's just some of the yachts and boats and motorboats out on the harbour. Anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 boats are on Sydney Harbour tonight, and on those boats another 250,000 people. A big show planned tonight, about an hour and a half from now. Leon.
All right, thanks, Michael. Take care and have fun while you're there. Colleen?
All right, thanks, Leon. Well, London plans to light up Big Ben. It has built a Millennium Dome, and it's planning to launch a river of fire. To explain what all of this means, we're joined now by Fionnuala Sweeney at the Millennium Dome.
Indeed. Once again, thank you, Colleen. And we are at the Millennium Dome, which is going to be the official point for the celebrations here in London, England. But the Millennium Dome isn't the only host for the parties this evening. All across London, there are going to be huge parties celebrating the new millennium. One will be at the Ferris wheel, which is on the River Thames just across from Big Ben. And as Big Ben chimes in midnight, we'll see the Ferris wheel begin to take off. Unfortunately, there won't be any passengers on it because a safety check yesterday showed up a few mechanical problems, but that wheel will be launched, initiated by the Prime Minister Tony Blair, who will fire a laser beam to start that wheel turning. But here at the Millennium Dome is going to be the biggest party Britain has seen for very many years. Queen Elizabeth will be here, also the British Prime Minister Tony Blair will arrive, and we're all expecting wonderful celebrations as a big spectacular carnival takes place later on this evening. That's all ahead of us. We're going to be following the celebrations as they take place throughout the day, and as tens of thousands of Londoners gear up for one of the biggest parties around, we'll be following it live and we'll bring it to you. I'm Fionnuala Sweeney reporting live from the Greenwich Dome, the Millennium Dome in Greenwich, London.
Fionnuala, just before you go, there were some reports about some glitches in the celebration, some invitations not being sent out to the festivities at the Dome. What's the latest on that?
Well, what broke yesterday, the news that broke yesterday, that the party tonight for some 10,000 people
was going to be held and is going ahead, but unfortunately, 2/3 of the invitations sent out were not received, and the organisers have been blaming that on a delay for the Christmas post. Now, earlier we spoke to Jenny Page, who is chief executive for the new Millennium Company, and she said, really, as it stands, only 400 families didn't get their tickets, and they have all been contacted, and they will arrive here and pick up their tickets before they go in. But this hasn't been good news for the Millennium Dome. There's been a lot of controversy about it over the last number of years, and certainly this news breaking yesterday, as well as the Ferris wheel not being able to carry passengers, has really put a little bit of a dent in the Millennium celebrations.
All right, thanks very much, Fanula.
All right, we take a quick break right now in our coverage of the Millennium breaking in or ringing in all around the world. We're getting word here at the CNN Center that there may be now the first Millennium baby. We'll check in with our Tom Mintier to find out where that may have happened. Stay with us.
CNN's global coverage of Millennium 2000 is brought to you by Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. We measure success one investor at a time.
Always value the individual above all else comes the most individual way yet of achieving success. Presenting iChoice from Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. A whole new level of personal service that lets you achieve your success your way. How do you measure success? Stanley Dean Witter, we measure success one investor at a time.
What a way to kick off the year 2000. Monday, Larry's very special guest is Monica Lewinsky. That's Monday, 9 Eastern, only on CNN.
First time we went on the internet, we wondered what all the hoo-ha was about.
Color TV? Now that was an invention.
Then we switched to Roadrunner high-speed online.
Now I just have to point and click to shop for the holidays.
We send greetings to friends and family and get some nice music. That's the internet.
Call Roadrunner Online Services today at 531-FAST for 50% off installation and a 30-day money-back guarantee.
So, how much longer are you planning to drive around with that cracked windshield? You know it's only going to get worse. Too expensive? Well, the deductible on your insurance may be less than you think. Call the professionals at Longhorn Glass with your insurance information, and they'll find out for you. Our certified installers use top quality glass such as Viricon and OEM glass. We offer a warranty against leakage for as long as you own the vehicle. So don't put it off any longer. Come by or call today. 512-443-9000.
The Moneyline News Hour, weeknight 6:30 Eastern on CNN.
All right, we want to show you some live pictures from Kandahar in southern Afghanistan, where we believe some of the 155 hostages on board this Indian airline jet are about to be taken off the plane. A short time ago, we spoke to our correspondent there who said that some vans had moved into the area and that it appeared to be, it looked as though there were preparations to move people off the plane. The Indian government hasn't confirmed all of the details yet, but we do know that there has been some kind of an agreement to have the hostages released. We don't know, again, the details, but the hijackers had been demanding the release of a group of militants from Kashmir who had been held in prison on the Indian side of Kashmir. So again, you were looking at live pictures from the Kandahar airport. That's in southern Afghanistan. That's where this plane was allowed to land more than 7 days ago now. These hostages, 155 or so people who have been on board, have been there since Christmas Eve, and we do know that there has been some sort of arrangement to let them out, and we will keep you up to date on that story as we get more and more details. Leon?
All right, thanks, Colleen. We will stay on top of that. Thank you very much. Now we continue with our coverage of the ringing in of the Millennium around the world. CNN's Tom Mintier standing by in Auckland, New Zealand, and we believe that we may have a announcement or two coming from down there. Tom, what's going on?
We do, Leon. I do have the Stork report for you. At 1 minute after midnight, the first child was born, and about 14 minutes later, the second. The first being a boy born here in Auckland, in West Auckland in the hospital. Mother and son doing fine. 14 minutes later, a baby girl was born in Christchurch, New Zealand. Mother and daughter both doing fine. So apparently neither were members of this competition by the radio station in Auckland. As a matter of fact, the first Millennium child, the baby boy that was born, the parents are saying they don't want to release any details. They're shying away from publicity, and it appears that we've got both. First a boy being born and then a girl being born, the first Millennium children, at least in this area. It may have happened in one of the Pacific Islands, but the people in New Zealand will lay claim to the first births of the Millennium. Once again, a baby boy born at 12:01, so the birth certificates are being prepared now, and they would read 010100.
You know, Tom, that's great. It'll be interesting to find out whether that's a product of good timing or good luck or both. Apparently, then, there were no real problems with the Y2K bug cropping up anywhere around there if the hospitals are working fine, in this situation at least.
Everything seems to be okay. You know, in the hour leading up to the Millennium, we did see several fire department vehicles making their way through the city. There were some apparently revelers that were a bit out of control, and the police moved into a couple areas where pubs were operating and apparently had some discussions with some people about the amount of alcohol they consume. But as you look out on the streets here in Auckland, people seem to be sincerely having a good time and enjoying this start of the new century.
Well, we may have to count 9 months from now to see how many other babies are born. Thanks, Tom Mintier, reporting live from Auckland. Colleen?
All right, thanks very much, Leon. And we want to take you once again back to southern Afghanistan, to the scene there on the tarmac of the airport in Kandahar, where we expect that 155 passenger and crew are expected to be released from this plane. Our correspondent Nick Robertson is there on the ground. Nick, it appears to be, we think we can see some people coming out of the plane now. Have you got a better vantage point?
I have a reasonable vantage point here, and what we can see so far, what we've seen so far, are 3 of the hijackers who have come off the aircraft. One of them was carrying a gun, and another one carrying a gun was wearing a mask. Now, those hijackers are now on the ground. They've been to talk with some of the cars, some of the people that have come up to the aircraft in the cars, and some people have begun to climb aboard the aircraft. We can see that. Now, a few minutes ago, a plane coming from Delhi in India arrived carrying India's foreign minister and we believe 3 of the Kashmiri militants whose release was demanded by the hijackers. Now, so far, as I say, we've seen 3 hijackers, at least one of them carrying a gun, get out of the aircraft and get down. And what we're beginning to see here now is the final steps, final stages of the negotiation that most people here hope will bring about an end and of the standoff and a release of those 150-plus passengers aboard the aircraft.
Nick, is it too soon to talk about the fate of the hijackers and what sort of legal proceedings may lie ahead?
It's not clear yet what will happen to the hijackers or what will happen to those 3 militants who have been transported here, who may be released or may not. We don't know at this stage. It's too early to say. But what we do know has been concern in the last few days for negotiators is which country these hijackers and the militants should end up in. Afghanistan has said categorically does not want to give political asylum to the hijackers or to these militants. So it's not clear at this stage. We do understand that the plane that brought the Indian foreign minister in here a few minutes ago will be used to transport the passengers back to India, and that's expected to happen within the next hour or so here. It will be getting dark here in Kandahar in a little over an hour's time. There is no lighting facility on the runway for planes to take off or land, so whatever formalities, whatever technicalities need to be completed to bring about the end of this crisis crisis will need to happen before it gets dark within the next hour or so.
Nick, we're wondering if it's possible for you to give us a bit of a wider shot there. And in the meantime, can you just remind us of what led up to this? Because there was a person killed. Go ahead, Nick.
That's correct. We can certainly allow you to see more of the airfield here and give you a better idea of what's going on. Now, right now, 3 motorcyclists rushing out to the aircraft. There's a lot of waving going on by some of the Taliban who are standing around the runway. There seems to be a little bit of confusion as to exactly what steps should be taken and who should be doing what at this time. Now, you are correct. One passenger was killed by these hijackers in the early stages of this crisis. He was reportedly stabbed to death for looking out below his blindfold at the hijackers. That happened, we understand, in the early stages of the hijacking. Now, the modalities of where the hijackers should go and exactly how the passengers should be released, who comes off first. We do know that 4 wheelchairs have been moved into place. So clearly, at this stage, we can see that some of the passengers will need physical assistance to be brought off the plane. We can also see that some of the bags on board the aircraft have been brought out of the hold. Now, we don't know at this stage whose bags they are or what that means. But we're beginning to see the unfolding of the last stages of this hostage crisis. At least that's how it appears at this moment.
And I'd just like to explain to our viewers, Nick, stay with us, but I just want to explain to our viewers that the delay you see in the pictures here, the jitteriness of the pictures, is because of the fact that we are bringing these pictures to you from southern Afghanistan by satellite phone. And this is how the pictures end up looking. This is our technology. It's quite new, but it's great to be able to see this and great to have you there. Nick, tell us a little bit more about the condition of the passengers. They were allowed some food and medical care throughout the days on the plane, were they not?
That is correct. The United Nations has been bringing them 2 meals a day. They've been eating the same food that Afghans eat here, bread, rice, and some vegetable stews. Now, we understand that those bags that were brought off the aircraft belong to the hijackers. Perhaps, we don't know at this stage, but possibly a key element in one of the steps in diffusing the whole situation here. So those bags that have come off so far, we are told belong to hijackers. Now, at the edge of the runway, there are 4 passenger buses, 4 25-seater passenger buses waiting to pick up the passengers when they're allowed to leave the aircraft. The passengers, we've been told in recent days, have been becoming increasingly tired. We were also told at the same time that the hijackers were still very fresh, still very keen, and still very alert. The United Nations has done its best to try and give the passengers, as well as food, whatever can sustain them through their ordeal. They've been able to get aboard some medical supplies, we understand, because some of the passengers on board the aircraft are doctors, and we understand that they've been able to tend to the medical needs of some of the other passengers. Today, the United Nations were able to put aboard the aircraft towels and toothbrushes for the passengers on board there. Indeed, it has been a very long ordeal for them, and Kandahar Airport is not the kind of airport where you can expect to find the international facilities that might exist in a more widely used airfield. There is some electricity here, but there are not the generators to wheel out to keep the aircraft going when it's on the stand. The auxiliary engines that run the aircraft when it's idling have been on the go for over 100 hours, and it's only normal for those type of engines to run for about 3 or 4 hours. So the plane itself has been really put through its paces here. This Airbus 300 really put through its paces. We do not know at this stage if that failed auxiliary power supply has been repaired, but certainly for the whole of this day, for the last 12 hours or so, it has been off. and therefore there's been no heating, no air conditioning, and no lighting on board the aircraft for the last 12 hours or so. And it was extremely cold here last night. The puddles around the airfield froze over. During the day, the sun comes up as it is now, and it's very hot and very strong. And as we're looking now, we can see more vehicles rushing out to the plane. From this distance, very difficult to tell just who's aboard, which vehicles, and exactly what is happening. But we do know that 3 of the hijackers have come off the aircraft so far. I can see on the side of the runway other vehicles, other land cruisers belonging to the Taliban, who we understand are going to manage on the runway here the bringing off the aircraft of the passengers. More of those vehicles moving out. As I talk now, some of the motorcycle outriders escorting some of those vehicles across the runway out towards the aircraft.
All right, Nick.
We understand that the red vehicle we can see in the screen right now belongs to the Taliban Foreign Minister, Wakil Ahmed Mutawakkil. He will be in charge on the ground here of overseeing the hostage release.
All right, Nick, we can see that red car clearly. It's a little bit difficult from our shot to always see what's happening at the doorway of the plane, but as you've told us, there are passengers getting off this plane. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but how difficult has this situation been for the ruling Taliban in Afghanistan? Correct me if I'm wrong. Wouldn't they be somewhat sympathetic to the stated goals of the hijackers to have Kashmir independent from India?
I think that's a very accurate question. We have been told here by the United Nations that they feel, that, in fact, the head of the United Nations here in Afghanistan, that he felt the Taliban should be commended for the job that they've done. Because, as you rightly say, they're caught between a great number of pressures here. Some of those are, as you say, that the Taliban might feel some allegiance to some of the other causes that go on in this region. Now, the Taliban have said, their leader Mullah Omar has said that he wanted this situation dealt with very carefully. He did not want any innocent blood, as he said, to be spilled. And it appears, from what we've seen observing around the runway, that the Taliban have kept their distance. They've put up a security cordon around the aircraft. But so far, there's been no indication that that their actions on the ground here have caused any sort of any delay or disturbance to the negotiations that are going on. But very much, you are very accurate with your question.
All right, CNN's Nick Robertson, thanks very much for that update from southern Afghanistan, where people are getting off the plane. And CNN actually has just been told that the last of the hijackers is off the plane. We'll continue to keep you updated on this story as it develops, and of course on our coverage of the Millennium.
That's right. We'll get back to our live coverage this morning of the Millennium and its celebrations around the world. All eyes by officials and technicians around the world have been on New Zealand to check and see if any Y2K bug problems pop up there. Coming up, we will check in with the International Y2K Center in Washington to find out if there is any such thing as a Y2K bug. We go out now to break with a shot of the happenings now live from Times Square in New York.
CNN's global coverage of Millennium 2000 is presented by Lincoln, American Luxury.
How do you measure success? Presenting iChoice from Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, a dynamic new financial program that lets you achieve your success your way. How do you measure success? At Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, we measure success one investor at a time.
Well, when I got hurt and missed work, thought I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that?
Aflac. Well, even the best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does?
Aflac. Shouldn't ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac!
Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Aflac!
You have 17 voicemail messages.
Congratulations. You've been born into the information age. So you can be guaranteed that all kinds of useless yada and endless blah-bitty-blah will be constantly hurled at you from every direction. Unless you get lucky once you learn to read, and someone gives you a lifetime subscription to USA Today. USA Today. Not the most words, just the right ones.
Well, the United Nations is sponsoring an international Y2K center to monitor potential problems as the clock ticks into the year 2000. CNN's technology correspondent Rick Lockridge is at the center in Washington, D.C., and he joins us now live.
Good morning. Well, we're at the press center for the Y2K CC Center, as I like to call it, and it is, as you mentioned, sponsored by the United Nations and charged with collecting and distributing information about how the whole world is handling the Y2K rollover. Let's take a look at their website real quickly now, and you can see they've divided up the potential problem into a number of what they call sectors. Along the top here, energy, telecom, finance, transportation sectors, health and hospitals, customs, immigration, and very important food, water, and overall assessments. And as we scroll down here, you can see that at this hour, everybody's lights are flashing green for the most part, with one exception that we'll talk about in a moment. Now, joining me now is Bruce McConnell, who is the director of the Y2K CC Center. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
How's it going so far?
So far, we're going well. We have one report from the rolled over country of New Zealand. Everything is fine there, so we're off to a good start. We have 82 countries participating right now in our watch.
And you hope to have over 100 countries in all, after all is said and done, don't you?
We hope to have about 100, yes.
Now, if we take another look at the site here, we see that one country is reporting a yellow. It's the only yellow box you've got up right now. Yellow, of course, for moderate, suspected Y2K-related problems, and red would be for serious problems. In Nigeria, you've got something for health and hospitals. You've got a yellow box there. What can you say about that?
The Nigerians believe they're a little behind in the health and hospitals' work on Y2K, so they're anticipating that they may have some problems in some of their hospitals, and they're going to cut back service. They're anticipating service cutbacks.
Now, I know you're going to lengths to point out that just because there are problems, a yellow or a red box in some country, doesn't necessarily mean that it's Y2K related.
That's right, and here they're saying that they believe they will have some Y2K problems in their hospitals, but it's a localized thing. They recognize they're behind. And this is what we expect. We expect few incidents around the world today, but it's good to anticipate them.
Now, Bruce, you and I were talking about this yesterday. Using the internet, a network of computers, to report on the world's most serious computer problem ever seems like a little bit optimistic. Do you think that the internet will be robust enough to withstand not only the traffic you'll get, but also the other potential problems that might overtake it this weekend?
We're confident the internet's going to run, but we have backup, we have fax, we have good old voice telephone, satellite backup, so we'll be in touch with all our folks around the world. But a lot of work has been done on the internet and on the phone systems, and we expect them to work about as well as they normally do.
Thanks, Bruce. We'll be talking with you, I'm sure, again this morning.
Great, thanks.
We'll also be covering other internet coverage of the Y2K rollover around the world, some websites from some newspapers around the world, also some online celebrations from the Y2K Center here on I Street in Washington. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Rick. In the meantime, we continue to roll over across the globe. It's just past midday now in Egypt, and Matthew Chance is standing by at the pyramids at Giza. Matthew, what's going on there?
Thanks, Leon. Well, it is one of the more recognizable landmarks perhaps on the face of the earth. Certainly, it's one of the more dramatic or scenic locations from which to witness the dawning of a new century, of a new millennium. The Great Pyramids of Giza there in the background, built thousands of years ago by an Egyptian civilization, celebrating now not just the beginning of its 3rd millennium, but its 7th millennium. And there are big celebrations planned in the hours leading up to and beyond the stroke of midnight. You can see there the stage area, which is being built to accommodate an audience estimated to be around 50,000 people here to witness an extravagant sound and light festival organized by the French composer Jean-Michel Jarre. There's supposed to be a dramatic firework display, a dramatic laser and music technology display, and on the stroke of midnight that will culminate in what Jean-Michel Jarre says is a surprise of technology. The workmen putting the final touches to that now. There has been some controversy using the sacred site of the pyramids as a mere backdrop to what amounts to, in the minds of some people, little more than an extravagant stage show. There's also some opposition here in this predominantly Islamic country that coming during the holy month, Islamic month of Ramadan, these festivals are somewhat disrespectful to what is supposed to be a month of prayer and contemplation for Muslims around the world. The Egyptian government, though, have dismissed those criticisms, saying that they believe the marking of the year 2000 is a global celebration, and they want Egypt and the pyramids in particular to be a central focus of those festivities. Leon.
Well, that's an interesting place to have a focus set. Thank you, Matthew Chance. We appreciate that. What a fascinating shot that was behind it, too, wasn't it?
Beautiful. And more fascinating shots to come, like this one from Times Square in New York, where festivities are getting ready, and they're actually getting ready to raise that famous ball that will drop when midnight hits New York. They tested it earlier. It seems to be ready. Our coverage continues.
Showbiz This Weekend is brought to you by the Jamaica Tourist Board. Come to Jamaica and feel all right. Call your travel agent or 1-800-JAMAICA.
100 years pass, and Shiseido's ruby red liquid, the one that caressed the faces of Japanese women for so many generations, is even more sublime now as it touches the faces of women all over the world. In this new century, this era that empowers a woman to live life to the fullest and help create a more beautiful world, Oidermean is at home here, gently, thoroughly working to create more beautiful skin. 100 years pass, and time leaves so much less of its mark now on a woman's skin. The beauty of time gone by and the splendor of things to come are all mixed together in one bottle. From Shiseido.
All right, just moments ago we got to see the shot at New York's Times Square. CNN's Carol Lynn is there this morning, and Times Square just might be the most happening place to greet the new year.
It's nearly 7 a.m. Eastern Time in New York City, and a 24-hour celebration is about to begin there. Something has been scheduled in Times Square nearly every hour from now until the new year. Carol, what's going on in the heart of the Big Apple right now?
Colleen, what you're seeing is the first performance of the day celebrating midnight in the South Pacific. What you're looking at is a series of what they call time beings and fan dancers celebrating the awakening of midnight in New Zealand and the South Pacific. You're listening to a completely original score produced specifically for Times Square 2000. The sound system that you're hearing, which is virtually drowning me out at the moment, I believe, is being broadcast from 18 different speakers around Times Square. It is supposed to give you a sense of surround sound, which I can tell you from standing here, that's exactly what it is doing. It is to broadcast surround sound a half a mile out from this center stage. Now, what is about to happen in just a few minutes is that they're going to light up the new crystal ball, and it will begin its 1-minute ascension up a 77-foot flagpole at the top of the One Times Square building, which is the famous building that we all know so well here in the United States, that lights up with fireworks and a spectacular pyrotechnic display at the stroke of midnight. So this is the beginning of what is to be 24 hours of live programming out of Times Square today. Colleen, Leon?
All right, Carol Lynn standing by at Times Square, and of course we'll have that as events unfold there all throughout the day. So stay with us.
Tonight on the Emmy Award-winning Larry King Live, Larry welcomes the Dalai Lama and the Reverend Billy Graham. That's tonight, 9 Eastern on CNN.
So, how much longer are you planning to drive around with that cracked windshield? You know it's only going to get worse. Too expensive? Well, the deductible on your insurance may be less than you think. Call the professionals at Longhorn Glass with your insurance information, and they'll find out for you. Our certified installers use top quality glass such as Viricon and OEM glass. We offer a warranty against leakage for as long as you own the vehicle. So don't put it off any longer. Come by or call today. 512-443-9000.
It's the final sale of the year, the countdown to the millennium here at Town North Mitsubishi, and that means great news. Folks, you won't believe what I'm going to tell you, but right now you can get 0 down, 0 monthly payments, no interest for over a year. That's right, pay absolutely nothing for over 12 months here at Town North Mitsubishi on every Mitsubishi Galant, family sedan, the popular Montero Sport, or get this, the all-new redesigned Mitsubishi Eclipse sports car. Every one of these pay nothing for a year. It's only happening in one place, that's Town North Mitsubishi.
Man, I really got blasted last night. I was so drunk, I was blowing chunks until 2 a.m.
All I know is that I didn't have this tattoo yesterday.
When I came to, my car was in this ditch.
I just hope we didn't do anything. If I get pregnant, my parents will kill me.
You know, it wouldn't sound any smarter coming from you. Celebrating the new millennium, this is CNN.
Two and a half minutes away now from midnight. There you see at this moment in the Big Apple, the famous crystal ball atop of One Times Square is being unveiled. It is the largest crystal ball ever built by the famous Waterford Company in Ireland. We'll get to that in just a moment. But the original international date line, which once ran through Fiji until its neighbors warped the meridian and pushed the time change east, has now been illuminated by the sun.
But now it's Millennium Hour for the Southwest Pacific Island Group. In the capital, Suva, they'll celebrate as if they're the first to reach 2000.
That's right, and we're also going live to New York in just a moment, as we said, for the Times Square celebration there, as CNN's coverage of Millennium 2000 continues right now. Welcome back to the CNN Center in Atlanta. I'm Leon Harris.
And I'm Colleen McEdwards. It is a hopeful sign for the new millennium. We want to show you live pictures now from the airport in southern Afghanistan, where people have been leaving the plane. This is a hijacked plane. The people have been on the ground there for more than 7 days. And CNN, just a short time ago, we were showing you these pictures as well. CNN showing you pictures of people being removed from the plane. About 150 to 155 hostages have been on board for several days now. We also have been watching pictures of what we understand are 3 of the hijackers who have come off the plane, possibly more. Earlier we saw visuals of a vehicle that carried the ruling Taliban's foreign minister, who was apparently keeping things under control on the ground, overseeing what appears to be, and what officials have told us is a deal to set these hostages free in exchange for a group of militants that the hijackers wanted released from prison in India. And we'll keep you up to date on this breaking news story as we know more and more. And CNN's Nick Robertson is actually on the ground there now. Nick, what has happened since we spoke to you last? More people coming off?
Well, in the last few minutes, 4 passenger buses drew up next to the aircraft. We understand that they are waiting for all the passengers to come off the aircraft. Another bus came up the aircraft, and that had on board diplomats. It had some Indian diplomats, and it had other diplomats, Belgian, Italian, and Australian diplomats, who all represent some of the hostages on there, some of the other national hostages other than the Indian hostages on board. They are up by the aircraft right now. It's not clear from where we stand if they've gone on board the aircraft to talk to the hostages or exactly what is happening. But we understand that what the authorities are trying to create here is a controlled environment that we understand in the next half an hour or so we'll see all the passengers come off the plane and in a controlled way. We understand that some of those people are actually quite ill. If they're too ill to travel, we're told they'll be taken to hospital in Kandahar. Those who are not so ill, perhaps suffering more from stress from being in this situation for so long. There are medical facilities standing by here at the airport, medical personnel standing by to help them. But the sun is beginning to set here now, and we understand that the Indian Airlines jet that came in with India's foreign minister will be taking the majority, if not all of those passengers back to India. This airport has no electricity for runway lights and no runway lights, so that plane will have to take off before nightfall, and night is approaching now, and perhaps within the next hour it will be very much beginning to get quite dark here.
And the pictures we are looking at now are being brought to us by satellite phone, which is why you're seeing a bit of a jittery picture, a bit of a delay in those pictures as they are beamed to us from CNN's Nick Robertson there on the ground. Nick, remind us what led up to this.
Well, it started on Christmas Eve, on the 24th of December. This jet that we're looking at now took off from Nepal. The hijackers struck before it had reached its destination, Amritsar, took off from there, went to Pakistan, from there to the United Arab Emirates, and from there to Kandahar. And it's been on the ground here in Afghanistan now for a week. Today, there's been much more activity around the aircraft. Many vehicles coming and going, engineers trying to fix the auxiliary motors that give power and lighting and heating to the aircraft, and we can begin to see now more movement around the aircraft, perhaps some of those passengers actually coming off. Very difficult to tell, of course, at this distance. We don't see the normal big gangway ladder. There is one for this airstrip up against the aircraft. We can see it being brought in right now. At the back of the aircraft, the large ladder that will lead to the doors through which we expect the passengers to come out on the other side of the aircraft is being moved into place, perhaps an indication that some of those passengers can begin to come off. There are other ladders around the aircraft, some mechanics ladders. We have seen people coming and going on those ladders. The hijackers all came off within the last 15 or 20 minutes. So at this stage, waiting to see the passengers come off. The buses are in place to pick up those passengers as soon as they come off. They will be checked to check on their health condition. Those needing hospital treatment will be taken to local hospital. That's about 45 minutes drive from here. Others will be able to get treatment. Those less ill will be able to get treatment from a temporary medical facility set up here at the airport. Colleen.
All right, Nick, and we have been able to see quite a bit of activity around that plane there as we look at the satellite phone shot of that India Airlines plane on the tarmac. What more can you tell us about the 3 Kashmiri militants that we believe have been moved and believe may be part of any agreement that appears to have been reached?
Well, one of those militants, a cleric, was described as an ideological leader, Masood Azhar, an ideological leader of the group who led the hijack attempt. In fact, one report indicated that his brother may have been amongst the hijackers on board the aircraft. There have been attempts in the past to have this cleric released before. Now, we do know the earlier demands from the hijackers indicated that they had wanted the release of 35 people associated with them, 35 Kashmiri militants who are in jail in India released. So at the moment, we only have an indication that 3 are being released. We know little about the other ones, about the other 2 of the militants who have been released so far. We do understand that they have come here to the airport in Kandahar. We ourselves have not seen them yet. It is perhaps significant at this stage that while the diplomats are on board the aircraft with the passengers, that Mr. Wakil Ahmed Mutawakil, the Taliban foreign minister here, has driven off for private consultations with Mr. Singh, the Indian foreign minister. They've left the airport vicinity and gone off for a meeting somewhere else. We don't know what they're discussing at this stage, but probably the technicalities of how things will progress from here. The hijackers as well, their whereabouts now they've come off the aircraft, again, that's not clear at this stage. We are being kept at a distance of several hundred meters from the aircraft, and we're not allowed to move from this area, so very difficult to assess exactly where the hijackers have been taken and exactly what the next step will be for them. However, we do understand that a third country, that they will be going to a third country. The Taliban has said that they will not have the hijackers or the militants remaining in Afghanistan, and we understand that a third country or will host them. We don't know when they'll travel there or what that country is yet at this stage, but those are the details that we know so far. Colleen.
All right, CNN's Nick Robertson, who is on the ground there at Kandahar Airfield in southern Afghanistan, where the hijackers have come off that India Airlines plane, some passengers still to come off, and CNN will continue to bring you coverage of this story as it unfolds.
Those passengers now experiencing their first moments of freedom after a week or so on board that plane. But the only sentiment that could possibly even rival some of the celebrations that we're seeing around the world welcoming in the coming new millennium. We will continue now with our coverage of these celebrations as they take place around the world. We just had one that passed moments ago in New York. CNN's Carol Lynn is standing by at Times Square, New York, where things are starting to heat up quite a bit. Carol?
They are, Leon. What you're looking at is the One Times Square building, where at the top is a 77-foot high flagpole, where the ball was just elevated and made its debut. Let's take a look at just moments ago when the celebration began to debut this new 6-foot wide, 1,000-pound ball. There you can see it as it's being elevated and raised up the flagpole to the sounds of a virtual orchestra, conductor, only a conductor and a computer generating the sounds that you're listening to right now. Now this ball is covered with more than 500 Waterford crystals with a Star of Hope design, handcrafted circles with a 7-point star. And there's a cluster of wedge cuts around each star that symbolizes human diversity. There are 3 different types of light bulbs covering this giant ball, essentially clear bulbs and colored bulbs, and what they want is to have this spectacular color burst as it starts descending the pole 1 minute before midnight tonight. It's a high-intensity strobe light that will offer that effect. There are 90 rotating mirrors on this ball. Quite a different sight than the very first ball, which descended down that flagpole on that very same building back in 1904. Now, the history of time balls, as we were wondering, why did they use a ball to descend? Well, time balls were very popular in the mid-1800s. They were used to mark time, usually at the height of noon of the day, where the ball would drop in New York in Lower Manhattan in the late 1800s. It was from the Western Union building, where at noon the ball would drop and sailors out at sea would be able to set their chronometers to that time of day. And people started setting their watches to these time balls. In fact, there are 4 active time balls still working around the world. Perhaps one of the most famous ones is at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, England. A little bit of history there as we wondered why they used a ball to mark the passage of time. It was actually an idea that the electrician for the New York Times came up with when they banned fireworks, which was the first way that the New Yorkers here in Times Square marked the passing of the millennium. The fireworks apparently were raining ash down onto the crowd below. The police banned the fireworks, and the electrician thought, why not use a traditional symbol of the passage of time and also use new technology, which at that time was electricity. Also, moments ago, we had a performance taking place here, which continues as we speak. It was called The Awakening, which is to celebrate the awakening of midnight in the South Pacific. You're looking at some of the fan dancers there, which are to celebrate the passage of millennium in the South Pacific. What you're also listening to right now is an original score produced specifically for Times Square 2000. And you're hearing it, listening to it, from 18 different speakers, which are actually posted on top of different high-rises around Times Square to give a surround sound feel. And this surround sound sensation is supposed to be heard and felt within a half-a-mile area around Times Square. I hope you're enjoying the show as much as we are. Leon, Colleen?
Okay, we're enjoying the show. Are you enjoying the snow? It looks like it's starting to come down behind you a little bit.
It's been a cold and wet morning, but Leon, that hasn't stopped the crowds from gathering here. In fact, when I arrived here at 4 a.m. Eastern time, there were people sleeping in doorways waiting for this celebration to begin. People want to say, when asked where they passed the passage of the millennium, they want to say they were in Times Square. But I have to tell you that die-hard New Yorkers aren't here. Most of the people who are here are tourists. In fact, the latest polling of New Yorkers here indicate that more than half are going to spend their passage of the millennium, into the millennium, at home or with friends. So these are people not only from around the country, but from around the world. Leon?
I wouldn't doubt that. Most of the New Yorkers I know, they'd say you must be nuts going outside in the cold this time of morning, huh?
But no snow where we're going to next, which is Sydney, Australia, and our Michael Holmes, who is there for huge celebrations that are expected to draw more than 1 million people. Michael, what's up?
Well, the 1 million people are well in place. What you're seeing here are some amazing sea creatures. They represent the sea creatures of Australia. There are 18 lanterns, believe it or not, steel frames with 2 layers of silk over top of them. There are 18 of these things. They're 3.5 stories high, and they've just been parading up and down the harbour, and they are absolutely beautiful. Hand-painted by Chinese artists who were brought out here. Some viewers may remember this style of lantern. They were used in the 1997 handover of Hong Kong to China. Different lanterns, but the same idea. They're being pushed along by tugs, which are using GPS, global positioning satellite technology, to work out exactly where they are on the harbour. It's amazing. Each one is putting out its own music, and as I say, they represent the sea creatures of Australia. It's a 2.2 kilometre procession. It's been going for some 24 minutes to pass one spot, and they've been up the harbour and they're on their way back down the harbour. You can't really see from that shot, but they're about there. They're heading under the harbour bridge at the moment. And Chinese artists were brought out to Sydney, especially to hand paint those rather remarkable things. We've been standing here ogling them. They're just absolutely sensational. Just part of the major celebration going on here on Sydney Harbour. Everybody's gearing up for the big one, which will take place, of course, in about an hour from now. $3.5 million worth of fireworks will go up. The whole night's costing $6 million. So it's going to be quite an event in about an hour from now.
All right, thank you so much. Michael Holmes reporting live this morning from Sydney, Australia. Quite a moment did pass just moments ago in Kandahar, Afghanistan. We were watching as we were seeing the release of the hostages who have been held on board the plane there, the Indian Airlines plane. They've been there for a little over a week or so now, almost a week and a half. You're looking now at some more live pictures we're getting in. These are some pictures we're getting fed in to CNN exclusively over satellite telephone. We're also being joined now live by CNN's Nick Robertson, who's been there witnessing the entire event throughout the morning, or out the evening, rather, there in Afghanistan. Nick, what are you seeing right now?
Well, so far, Leon, we've seen one of the passenger buses that pulled up next to the aircraft leave. It left full, apparently, of passengers. And we're also looking at now Indian medical workers, some doctors and nurses who have walked out across the tarmac to the airport with their medical bags. And we understand that they're going to go now and check some of the passengers on board the aircraft as they're being released. as that one bus pulled away from the steps on the far side of the aircraft. Another bus pulled up to take its place. These buses, we understand, are going to take the passengers first for a medical check, then they will be taken to another Indian Airlines jet that came in with the Indian Foreign Minister a little while ago. They'll be taken to that jet, and very shortly they'll be leaving. Now, it is critical as the sun begins to set here in Kandahar that this whole operation continues in a sort of a transparent way. The agreements and negotiations between the hijackers and the Indian diplomats who've been working here is that this carefully choreographed process of events that we're looking at, first of all the hijackers leaving the aircraft, then the passengers all leaving safely, happens out in the open so that everybody can see that all steps agreed to in this process are taking place in a safe and orderly environment. Leon.
Well, Nick, from your vantage point, have you been able to make at least any sort of a cursory examination of the condition of the hostages? Have you seen any of them walking? Have they been carried off the plane or whatever?
Very difficult to tell again, Leon, from this distance here. The passenger gangway is on the far side of the aircraft. We're obstructed from seeing it by the body of the airplane, and as we talk, another vehicle carrying passengers has just driven away from the aircraft, carrying about 25 passengers there. We do know that in recent days, however, the passengers on board the aircraft have been coming very tired, and we understand that some of them are likely to be suffering from stress, and there are a number of people, a small handful we are told, who are actually quite sick on board the aircraft. Now, amongst the passengers who have been held hostage on the aircraft have been some doctors, and in recent days the United Nations has been able to get some medical supplies on board the aircraft, and those doctors have been allowed by the hijackers to administer to the medical needs of some of the other passengers on board the aircraft. And as we look right now, another passenger bus is pulling up around the aircraft. That passenger bus a few minutes ago left full of some of the hostages who were taken off the aircraft. So the process underway, and as we're looking right now, I can see an ambulance now speeding across the runway, like it was pulled up a few minutes ago at the foot of the steps by the plane, and that is now speeding across the runway. We understand that some of the people who were ill on board the aircraft may be taken to a local medical facility in Kandahar town, which is about 45 minutes drive from here. Also, there's a temporary medical facility been set up by international workers here, the International Red Cross, at the airport in tents to help treat some of the other passengers. And also we can see on the aircraft now one of the large passenger way doors on this side of the aircraft has now been opened. All the passengers, of course, coming out on the other side, coming down the wide gangway that's been put up, therefore that's been driven into position, and getting onto the buses that are pulled up on the other side of the aircraft. Leon.
Well, Nick, as we continue to watch this, and as we watch that passenger door from the cabin, cabin actually opening up there, we'll watch and see if anyone does come out of that door. I want to ask you about the hostage takers themselves, the hijackers. We saw them leave moments ago in another vehicle. Do we know anything at all about where they are heading, and if they have police or official escorts with them, and if they've actually been put together with the three other militants who had been released that we heard reports of by the Indian government?
We only have, at this time, Leon, a few details about what will happen to those hijackers. We have been told by the Taliban Foreign Minister, Mr. Mutawakil, that the Taliban do not want them to stay in Afghanistan, and we also understand from other diplomatic sources that a third country will give them refuge, that they will be able to go there. Now, it's not clear if that third country is taking in the militants that have been released. The hijackers demanded their release, whether the hijackers and those militants will team up together and go to one country, but we do know the hijackers will be going to a third country, and it does seem very likely from the indications that we've had over recent days that they would likely all go together to another country. But again, those are details of the negotiations that have been taking place here that we have not been privy to. There's been very, very little information on the substance essence of the negotiations. A few tiny details leaking out through the day, indications of optimism early on today, and it was only a few hours ago that we began to see and were told officially that a deal had been reached that could be concluded today, and very much that's what we're watching now, the final steps in that deal of the hijackers getting off the plane and now the passengers being released. Leon.
Very good. CNN's Nick Robertson standing by there live by the tarmac next to that Indian Airlines plane that's been on the tarmac for about a week now in Kandahar, Afghanistan. We'll continue to cover that story as it develops throughout the morning. And we will take a break and be back with more coverage of the Millennium celebrations around the world in just a moment. Don't go away.
Well, when I got hurt and missed work, glad I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that?
Aflac. Well, even best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does?
Aflac. Shouldn't ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac!
Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Aflac!
In any business, there can be only one priority. At Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, we have never forgotten ours. Not surprisingly, we measure success a little differently.
There's a very special ring at Zales this year, with the Millennium set in diamonds inside the band. It's an exquisite half-carat diamond solitaire in 18-karat gold for a special price of only $19.99. Think of it. Just as the Millennium is turning, you'll have the power to make time stand still. Exclusively at Zales stores or shop online at Zales.com.
As we've been saying, we've got lots of breaking news to report this morning.
That's correct, and we want to take you back now to Moscow for more on the announcement that Russian President Boris Yeltsin is resigning. CNN's Eileen O'Connor is in Moscow and is going to give us the very latest on this. Eileen, what can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that it is now official. Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin has become the interim acting President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation. And in fact, Russian President Boris Yeltsin actually handed over the strategic nuclear arsenal in the form of a briefcase to Vladimir Putin. As you can see, the briefcase right there, in an official ceremony at the Kremlin. And that means that, that Mr. Putin is now, in fact, head of the Russian strategic nuclear arsenal. In fact, he's head of all of the security services in Russia, and that makes him the acting president. And he has been very busy. While Russian President Boris Yeltsin has gone to his country residence outside of Moscow and is going to celebrate this millennium quietly with his family, Vladimir Putin, the president, acting president, is now hard at work. He's already had a cabinet meeting, and he is now having a Security Council meeting. He told his government ministers, by the way, that they should not engage in politics right now, that they must get down to business immediately, that there is much to be done. And he is at pains to tell everyone, including the West, that his Russia will be a democratic Russia.
I'm absolutely convinced that if we abide by the principles that have become the cornerstone of our development, a liberal economy, free market, human rights, respect for our neighbors, and respect for our partners all over the world, well, then Russia will be able to occupy a prominent place in the future community of nations, in the next century and in the next millennium. I'm sure that Russia will be a democratic country.
Now, it is his strength that has appealed to so many people. He has been very strong in his actions in Chechnya against what he calls terrorists there, the rebel Chechen leadership down in that breakaway region. And his widespread bombing campaign has caused many people to leave their homes and has caused some civilian losses, although he counters on just how many that is. But those kinds of actions of his have come under criticism, as particularly from the West. But his talk of a strong Russia is very appealing to Russians here. He enjoys widespread support, and he insists to the West that having a strong Russia is nothing to fear.
Russia has only one ambition: to enjoy respect from other nations. And we will surely achieve that. I think that everyone is interested in that, including our partners in the West, because the world has to be well balanced.
Now, this new acting Russian president, Vladimir Putin, says that he will continue, as we said, with democratic and free market reforms. He says that he will act and enact some stronger laws. He now has a Duma, a parliament that is much more pro-government. But it is not his words, it is his actions that will be watched before these presidential elections in March. Right now, the date for presidential elections, according to the Constitution, is March 26th. That will be confirmed on January 5th by a Council of Federation meeting, which is scheduled to take place there. But this is a man that the West will be watching very carefully. Vladimir Putin himself, though, did extend an invitation to the U.S. President Bill Clinton to come, and perhaps U.S. officials will want to take up that invitation sooner rather than later. Colleen?
All right, thanks very much, Eileen. And more on that aspect of the story now, Leon.
That's right. Since you mentioned that, let's go now to the White House. CNN's John King standing by there this morning, gauging the reaction to Russian President Boris Yeltsin's resignation. John, what have you heard there?
Leon, just moments ago, President Clinton issuing a written statement paying tribute to what he called the historic tenure of Boris Yeltsin as Russia's first democratically elected president. Mr. Clinton's statement focusing largely on the positive, saying that during Mr. Yeltsin's tenure, some 5,000 strategic nuclear warheads have been dismantled, that the United States and Russia have worked together to remove the nuclear weapons from the former Soviet republics. The statement did, however, note the disagreement over the United States' disagreement with Russia right now over the military campaign in Chechnya, and Mr. Clinton saying that he looked forward now to working with the acting president, Vladimir Putin. Mr. Clinton also has a very close personal relationship with Mr. Yeltsin despite their differences, and he included a brief personal tribute to Mr. Yeltsin as well. The question now is what to make of Mr. Putin. U.S. officials had a close working relationship with him when he was Boris Yeltsin's national security advisor. They say he has become more rigid since he became the prime minister, but they do view this as an opportunity. Very encouraged by the results of the recent parliamentary elections, in which candidates pushing economic reform did moderately well. They think now that Mr. Yeltsin had been in failing health for some time. Perhaps now with a younger, more energetic Russian president, there will be an opportunity for some progress in this relationship, despite the differences. Obviously, the differences over Chechnya, also an ongoing U.S. federal investigation into Russian money laundering, and finally, U.S. officials noting that Boris Yeltsin, as always, a flair for the dramatic, announcing his resignation on New Year's Eve. John King, CNN, reporting live from the White House.
All right, thanks very much, CNN's John King. We want to continue now with our celebration of the millennium around the world. Our next stop is Giza, Egypt, where incredible celebrations are being planned at the Great Pyramid. Stay with us. That is coming right up.
CNN's global coverage of Millennium 2000 is presented by Lincoln, American luxury.
Wood, leather, adrenaline, the new Lincoln LS.
Stand by, heavy ground, X-ray 1, ready to tip.
Initiating data download.
At Merrill Lynch, we're still bullish.
Analyzing data.
From Wall Street to the world.
Well, when I got hurt in this work, glad I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that?
Aflac. Well, even best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does?
Aflac. Shouldn't ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac!
Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Aflac!
50,000 people are expected to greet the new millennium at the Great Pyramids in Egypt. Security for the celebration is very tight, and CNN's Matthew Chance is covering all of the preparations from Giza, just outside of Cairo. Matthew?
Thanks. The Great Pyramids of Giza, the shadow of them now, the stage for what promises to be a very dramatic celebration, a festival, an extravaganza of music and lasers, orchestrated by the French composer Jean-Michel Jarre. Those pyramids, of course, built thousands of years ago by an Egyptian civilization, celebrating not just the start of the 3rd millennium like the rest of us here, but the 7th millennium here. And there are big celebrations, as I say, underway in the hours leading up to and beyond the stroke of midnight. Final preparations are being put to the area where those celebrations are being held. There are expected to be laser displays, a climax of the display at midnight with a laser and firework display and images projected onto the sides of the pyramids. There have been some voices of opposition, especially from archaeological purists, for instance, who say that it's inappropriate for the pyramids, a sacred site, to be used as a mere backdrop for what many people see as little more than an extravagant stage show. Also voices of concern from members of the Islamic community here. It is, of course, a predominantly Muslim country, and this is the holy month of Ramadan, supposed to be a time for prayer and contemplation. Many Muslims feel here that it is inappropriate for these festivities to be held. A pro-Islamist newspaper this morning says this celebration is the devil's celebration. The government, though, and the organisers of these festivities have brushed aside this criticism, saying that preparations to celebrate the year 2000 are of global concern, and that Egypt and the pyramids in particular should play a central focus of the festivities. Back to you.
All right, CNN's Matthew Chance, who joined us from Giza, Egypt. And we will have more on the celebrations around the world just ahead on CNN. Stay with us.
CNN's global coverage of Millennium 2000 is brought to you by Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. We measure success one investor at a time.
Value the individual above all else comes the most individual way yet of achieving success. Presenting iChoice from Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. A whole new level of personal service that lets you achieve your success your way. How do you measure success? Stanley Dean Witter, we measure success one investor at a time.
We're 27 minutes away from New Year's somewhere, and one of the biggest New Year's celebrations in Europe will be held in Greenwich, England, which, as you may know, is the reference point of world time. CNN's Fanula Sweeney is there this morning. She's got a look at the last-minute preparations underway there for us now. Fanula?
Thanks indeed, Leon. The last-minute preparations are well underway. Behind us, trucks are rolling along the ground. There's the odd helicopter above. There's a lot of security here at the Millennium Dome, which, of course, is the official point for the celebrations here in Britain this evening. Later on today, the Queen will be here. Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, will be here. But really, the Millennium Dome, while being the official point for the celebrations in Britain, it isn't the only thing that's happening in London tonight. Let's take a look. If you suddenly found yourself smack in the middle of London with nothing to do this New Year's Eve, you would still be right in the middle of it all. For the official celebrations take place in and around the River Thames, taking in, among others, the Ferris wheel near the Houses of Parliament in central London and the Millennium Dome in Greenwich, where the official midnight celebrations take place. Queen Elizabeth will officially open the dome. Prime Minister Tony Blair will be there, as well as countless other dignitaries.
The most complicated thing about Friday has been actually coordinating the guest list, I have to say.
All day long there will be activities along the Thames, including just after midnight a pyrotechnic display, more popularly known as the River of Fire. But some bad news for the specially built Ferris wheel. A last-minute inspection has determined that the wheel isn't safe enough to carry passengers. However, Prime Minister Tony Blair will still fire a laser beam to start the wheel turning Friday night. And of course, in keeping with the festive spirit, the Queen has declared Friday, today, a public holiday. And also the Home Office here in Britain has decreed that all bars can remain open. They opened about an hour ago and they will remain open until 11 p.m. on January the 1st. I'm Fanula Sweeney in London. Back to you in Atlanta.
All right, thank you, Fanula. Well, we turn now to the millennial celebrations underway across the Pacific. The first inhabited landmass to welcome the new millennium, well, here it is, Kiribati Island, which has been renamed Millennium Island for this special occasion. Kiribati leaders extended the international date line more than 1,000 miles to the east just to grab the world's attention in welcoming the 21st century in first.
And the skies over Auckland were brightened by the largest fireworks display ever mounted in New Zealand. Rockets were launched from barges floating in Auckland's harbour. There you see it now. The landmark Sky Tower and from the harbour bridge as well. Thousands of people travel to Auckland to greet the new millennium.
That's right, and not far away from Auckland, Auckland's neighbor, Sydney, Australia. You see there a live picture we've got coming in from the harbor there. These giant so-called lanterns. Hard to call them lanterns because they're just so beautiful and so big. You're looking there at some structures that are made of steel and silk and stand some 3 stories high, floating there in the harbor of Sydney.
And now you're looking at live shots of Times Square in New York, where people in the square are getting ready to welcome the new year, the new millennium. It's the crossroad for the world, really, this square. A new Waterford crystal ball created in Ireland will mark the moment later tonight. And a trial run of the Millennial Ball was conducted yesterday. Everything seemed to go all right. I guess that ball is Y2K ready. Already several hundred young people have gathered in Times Square under a steady drizzle to mark this very special day.
Now, speaking of that drizzle, it looks as though it's cleared up somewhat there in New York. We were talking to Carol Lynn a few moments ago, and it looked like it was coming down pretty good, but it may have eased up quite a bit there. That's right. So let's get a check of the weather now. Our meteorologist Dave Hennon's got a forward look to the weather conditions for midnight and sunrise at points elsewhere. Dave?
Yeah, Leon, you mentioned New York City. We were looking, there is not much chance for rain there today beyond the next several hours. We did see some rain and snow mixed at most of the airports there in the last several hours. That will move off, and then the weather should improve. Let's take you around the world to some various destinations and what we are looking at today. It is quite windy right now in Sydney. We are expecting the winds to continue to be strong through the millennium, which is now less than a half an hour or so away. We are looking at the potential for rain in the area, but we have not seen much widespread rain. Sydney located right about there, and you can see some cloud cover and some gusty southerly winds, which means some colder air is funneling into the Sydney area. Take a look at the weather maps on into New Year's Day, and we do see that we do have a trough of low pressure and some showers in the vicinity. Let's check some other destinations. Sydney temperatures for tomorrow, looking at about a high of 21 Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Into Asia, the weather for Millennium celebrations in Tokyo looks pretty good. Should be mainly clear. Frontal system moving through that particular vicinity. Hong Kong looking pretty nice as well. Clear skies for the most part. Some easterly wind flow, but dry conditions are expected. A check of temperatures for New Year's Day, about 8 degrees Celsius or 47 degrees Fahrenheit in Tokyo. Over into Europe, London may see a shower or two from Millennium celebrations. Paris looks okay as well. And back down in through the Balkans. Some snow in the forecast there. London 6, the forecast high tomorrow. Check the weather over Australia, and we will be looking at live pictures now of Sydney as our Millennium coverage returns right after this.
CNN's global coverage of Millennium 2000 is brought to you by Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Well, when I got hurt and missed work, thought I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that?
Aflac. Well, even best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does?
Aflac. Shouldn't ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac!
Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Aflac!
In any business, there can be only one priority. At Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, we have never forgotten ours. Not surprisingly, we measure success a little differently.
This year, the Golden Globe race begins with the end of the affair.
You'll marry me. That's the promise.
Winner of 4 Golden Globe nominations, including Best Picture, Best Performance by an Actress, Julianne Moore, Best Director, Neil Jordan, Best Original Score, and named to Time Magazine's Top 10 list as one of the best pictures of the year.
Love doesn't end just because we don't see each other.
The End of the Affair, rated R. Now in select cities, January 7th in additional cities.
The King brothers, separated at birth. George King went to a family that subscribed to fishing magazines. James's family subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. 28 years later, George lives with his parents, while his brother James started a B2B web company and went public with a record first-day pop. Food for thought, especially since you can get 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal for just 57 cents a day. That's 25% off the regular rate. Call 800-258-4600. That's 800-258-4600. For the Wall Street Journal.
Well, we have been covering the celebrations surrounding the arrival of the year 2000. There are still concerns about possible complications from the Y2K computer bug, as it's called. The International Y2K Cooperation Center has been created to minimize the adverse effects of Y2K on the global economy. And CNN's Rick Lockridge joins us now with more on those efforts. Rick?
Well, we can tell that a lot of viewers are obviously watching their televisions and monitoring the internet at the same time. We can tell that because no sooner did we have Bruce McConnell, the director of the Y2K Center, on, and he was also on another network, and they got so much traffic on their site that it has somehow crashed and we can't pull it up right now. Bruce joins me now. Bruce, is that what you think happened? Is it probably just a result of a lot of traffic early on?
We're not sure. We're going to have it up right away.
But when you do have it up, you'll have some good news for the countries that have, some of the countries that have already passed over. Tell me about that.
We've heard from 3 countries that have rolled over, as we say. New Zealand, Fiji, and Tonga. All systems are green, so this is good news. We're pleased that it's meeting our expectations or exceeding them already.
Now, we do have New Zealand's own website up. We can take a look at that if you like, Martine. It shows here that they've passed over, and they have no reports of Y2K-related incidents in the 12 sectors that they have been monitoring, the ones that you suggest they monitor. Tell me about those sectors, those categories, and what's important about those.
Well, these are the critical services that people depend on in daily life: electricity, telecommunications, energy in general, transportation services, customs, government services, health, all the things we depend on and which have computers involved in them.
And when the site is up and running, as I'm sure it will be soon, you see behind you there we have the green lights all across the board. That's what you want to see.
That's right.
Now, if you have a problem, it'll turn to yellow, and if you have a big problem, it'll turn to red.
That's right.
So far, no big problems.
No big problems. We expect few, if any, serious incidents this weekend.
Now, I know you have a phone call that you have to take coming up with John Koskinen, the president's Y2K czar. What will you be talking with him about?
We'll be talking with him and the New Zealand national coordinator just to get an update on the situation in New Zealand.
Now, knowing that New Zealand has passed over without incident, should we take that as a sign of encouragement, or is that really kind of meaningless at this point?
It's definitely a good sign, but I think we'll be watching, remaining vigilant over the days that come, because we expect some problems next week with business systems, so we'll keep our eyes open.
Any particular geographic locations in which you expect to see more problems than others?
We're looking at everyone right now. It's a little too early to tell.
All right, well, that's a pretty good way to evade that question, but I'm sure we'll have more data from you later.
That's right.
And perhaps we'll see some more of the color changes on the chart later on. Thanks a lot for stopping in.
Thank you.
And Leon, we'll have more for you from the International Y2K Cooperation Center here on I Street in Washington later on this morning.
Good deal. Thanks, Rick. A lot of us are continuing with our low-tech knocking on wood, hoping that nothing happens with that Y2K bug. We'll be back with more in just a few moments. Stay with us. Our coverage continues as we watch these Millennium celebrations come in from around the world. This is one of the most beautiful sights we've seen so far this morning. Live pictures from Sydney, Australia. The harbor there and that multi-million-dollar celebration there underway. Lots more just ahead.
Well, when I got hurt and missed work, I thought I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that?
Aflac.
Well, even best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does?
Aflac.
Shouldn't ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac.
Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Aflac.
How do you measure success? Presenting iChoice from Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, a dynamic new financial program that lets you achieve your success your way. How do you measure success? At Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, we measure success one investor at a time.
Mark John Jeffries here for People PC. Many people wonder how good a computer People PC can possibly offer for just $24.95 a month, along with unlimited internet access, in-home service, and great deals. Is a People PC computer a no-name piece of pre-war junk? No, my friend, it's not. It's a brand you know with all the power you need to send emails, manage your finances, and play important new video games. How can People PC offer such a fine machine, unlimited internet access, in-home service, and great deals, all for just $24.95 per month? To find out, visit peoplepc.com or call 1-800-PEOPLE-PC. I hope this clears up any ambiguity. Thank you, and God bless.
You can get an Epson Stylus Color 660 printer for the incredibly low price of just $99 if you join People PC today. Just visit peoplepc.com.
Welcome back. 18 lanterns are floating in Sydney Harbor, which you'll be able to see as the Philharmonic plays, as New Year's celebrations get underway in Sydney, Australia. There's the lanterns there, and Michael Holmes will tell us that these guys are supposed to become fireworks at some point, aren't they?
They're all part of it, Colleen. Yeah, they are amazing to watch. Remember, they're 3.5 stories high. So these are giant lanterns. To call them lanterns seems to underplay them. And there's 18 of them, as we said before. They're steel framed and covered in silk and then hand painted by Chinese artists who were brought out to Australia to paint them. It's interesting, the connection with China. There's a large Chinese population here in Australia. Worth remembering, Australia is the most multicultural nation on Earth. More than 160 different nationalities live in Sydney alone, and 40% of Australians were born overseas. Very multicultural place, and it seems like most of them are down on the harbour tonight. Over 1 million people down here tonight.
Shadow the bay. Looking everywhere, 'cause I had to find you. This is not the way that I remember it here. Anyone will tell you it's a prisoner island. Hidden in the summer.
are watching some of the celebrations in Sydney, Australia, leading up to the new millennium there. Some musical presentation, obviously showing some of the scenes around that beautiful continent.
The continent is actually stepping into a very big year for that continent with the Olympics going to Sydney in the year 2000.
That's right, a huge boon for tourism, I imagine, and CNN's Michael Holmes is there. Michael, how big is the year 2000 for Sydney?
Well, it's huge, as you can imagine. As we've been saying, over 1.5 million people here. There's something like 7,000 boats on the harbour. And as well as being a wonderful celebration of the new year and a great place to celebrate, of course, it's being seen by Australians also as a rather spectacular curtain raiser to the Olympic Games. Of course, Sydney, Australia will be the host of the first Olympic Games of the millennium. They'll be starting in September, and everyone's very excited about that too.
Well, Michael, if I can, on a personal note, since you've gone back home now, let me ask you, what is your family doing to pass this millennium? Are they doing something are they joining a lot of these, any of these big major celebrations?
Well, most of my family's on the west coast of Australia in Perth. They'll be celebrating in about 3 hours, and they're doing it at home. My sister actually lives here in Sydney. She works at one of the television stations here, and she, like me, is working.
Well, the more the merrier.
What are people saying there, Michael? Michael, what are people saying about any of the Y2K issues? Has it been a big concern there, or not so much?
You know, a lot of countries, and I know in New Zealand there's been concern and there's even been a bit of government cautioning of people. Here, there is an enormous confidence. There is a decided calm about Y2K. Many of the banks have even not given assurances, but guarantees that everything will be okay. They've spent something like 12 billion Australian dollars fixing the problem over the last 5 years or so. They say they are ready, and there seems to be an enormous confidence here.
All right, good deal. We're crossing fingers and knocking on wood for you folks down there. Thanks much, Michael. Appreciate it. I'm still saying that is one of the most beautiful places on the world to be.
It is stunning. Just a stunning harbor and a stunning celebration. More pictures of it for you now as we leave you for a short break. But there's much, much more to come here on CNN. Stay with us. Our coverage continues.
And the naked world with rocks and sand.
CNN's global coverage of Millennium 2000 is sponsored by Shiseido. Shiseido wishes you a happy millennium.
100 years pass, and Shiseido's ruby red liquid, the one that caressed the faces of Japanese women for so many generations, is even more sublime now as it touches the faces of women all over the world. In this new century, this era that empowers a woman to live life to the fullest and help create a more beautiful world, Oidermine is at home here, gently, thoroughly working to create more beautiful skin. 100 years pass, and time leaves so much less of its mark now on a woman's skin. The beauty of time gone by and the splendor of things to come are all mixed together in one bottle. From Shiseido.
Well, the first major metropolitan area to bring in the new year was Auckland, New Zealand, and that led some to believe that there might be some Y2K related issues that would surface there before anywhere else. And CNN's Tom Montier has been watching the celebrations and that other niggling issue of Y2K. Tom, what can you tell us?
Well, Colleen, I can tell you the lights are still on, the phones are still working, the computers are still on. Apparently, 2 hours ago, when 99 became 00, the impact here was minimal. They still aren't giving up on the possibility of problems. There are no international flights out of New Zealand until midday tomorrow. The airlines are saying this is simply a precaution. This is not worrying about Y2K. As a matter of fact, they're putting out the word that there simply wasn't enough interest in people wanting to fly until midday tomorrow. that it's not a Y2K precaution, but simply people were not interested. But for the most part, the only real problem that you could detect is when you try to make an international call from a cell phone. You hear the recorded voice of an operator saying that all lines are being used right now, and due to congestion, your call cannot go through. So it appears that the people here are now starting to settle down a little bit, having 2 hours of celebration behind them. Many are heading home. It's basically starting to wind down. The fireworks are over. You do hear people out in the streets still celebrating a bit, but it was the fireworks display that was the centerpiece of what was going on here in Auckland tonight. It lasted 12 minutes, but it will last probably 12 generations that people will be talking about. The night the skies were illuminated over Auckland, from skyline all the way around this city. It was ablaze in fireworks, something that was just almost indescribable. I have never seen fireworks as Auckland saw them tonight. As you can see, there are a lot of lights on in this city. Any concerns that the lights would go out for the fireworks and then not be able to come back on were simply not well founded. If you look around the city, you can really not tell much difference from 2 hours ago as right now. I'm Tom Intier, CNN, reporting live from Auckland, New Zealand.
All right, CNN's Tom Intier bringing us up to date there, and we're going to take you back to Sydney for more of the beautiful pictures from the harbor there.
That's right. They're about to trip the clock there, the clock and the calendars there in Sydney. 4 minutes away from midnight in Sydney. Stay tuned.
Tonight on the Emmy Award-winning Larry King Live, Larry welcomes the Dalai Lama and the Reverend Billy Graham. That's tonight, 9 Eastern on CNN.
When it comes to being a master thief, it takes one to catch one. Why are you following me?
I've got a proposition for you.
The countdown has begun for the biggest hit of the new millennium, premiering December 31st on pay-per-view. Sean Connery. You're perfect. Catherine Zeta-Jones.
This is called entrapment.
Actually, it's called blackmail. Entrapment, premiering December 31st on pay-per-view.
Not all dogs understand the meaning of Christmas. Merry humbug! But this Booch, he's ruining it for everyone.
Why that guy take all our stuff?
It's gonna take these crafty canines to save the holiday.
We're gonna deck his halls.
It's an all-dogs Christmas Carol on Fox Family Channel.
Deck the halls with Bow Wows in December as Fox Family celebrates the 25 days of Christmas, only from this month's featured network.
The advantages of digital cable versus satellite are clarity and dependability.
Digital cable was so much more convenient than satellite TV. I don't have to put a dish on my roof.
And when we talked to the dealer, it was rather expensive to get the dish because you have to buy additional equipment and you have to have line of sight.
The satellite dish doesn't offer the local stations, and digital cable does.
With Time Warner Cable and the digital system, we have it all.
Digital. Digital cable from Time Warner. Welcome to what's next.
It's the countdown to the new millennium here at Town North Nissan. What that means to you is huge savings on a great group of Nissans. Hi friends, I'm Randy Ross, and here's what I mean. Right now, brand new set of Nissans, the Crew Cab pickup truck, the only four-door compact pickup truck on the market for only $299 a month on that lease. How about a brand new Xterra, the popular sport utility vehicle from Nissan? Lease it for $349 a month. Or Quest minivans, 3.9% factory financing. Got the TV VCR package, redesigned. You owe it to yourself to come to one place, Town North.
Celebrating the new millennium, this is CNN.
It is 2.5 minutes away from midnight in Sydney, Australia, where a celebration of Olympic proportions awaits the new millennium.
Well, the new year touches Australia for the first time as CNN continues its coverage of the arrival of 2000 around the world.
That's right. Sydney Harbour will be the venue for what's billed as the largest fireworks display on Earth.
Canberra will join the party, but Australia's capital will also be looking for signs of any Y2K bug. So welcome to the next stop in CNN's coverage of Millennium 2000.
Year 2000 falls on a midsummer's night in Sydney, although it is a bit cool and windy there.
Well, Sydney greets the new year with a $3.5 million fireworks display. That should warm things up. And that's going to be launched from the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. And CNN's Michael Holmes is in Sydney and joins us now live. Michael?
You're looking at a beautiful picture there, Colleen, of the Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It's ironic, you know, that the Opera House now considered one of Australia's icons. And the first of the fireworks have begun. Magnificent.